Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello and welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. We're coming up on our third weekend of championship action. It's another big one. We've got 11 matches across Saturday and Sunday. We've got more of a football flavour than hurling this week. So later on we'll have Brendan Cummins joining us to look ahead to the 2 qualifier round 1 matches. But now I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Rory O'Neill, as always. I've got Kieran Shannon with me, a freelance journalist, columnist, basketball, football coach, man of many, many talents, and Tomas Ó Sé, a man who also has a talent or two, one of which has been annoying people from small counties this week. Tomas, what I have to say first of all is this wasn't off the top of your head by any means. You took the bother of going with the whole writing a note on my iPhone and taking a screen grab of it and tweeting that. So you're very much, I'm just going to read it out, not going to ask you to read it out again in case anybody missed it. A very disappointing Sligo pulled out of the championship. I'd love to know the exact situation that has led to this. It's 11 players or more. Leitrim and Longford have had issues. We never found out the exact details of the Leitrim situation. Fermanagh, who had 18 players missing, fulfilled their fixture at Ennis, so it can be done. I'm not downplaying the seriousness of this, but the integrity of the competition is being questioned now. Galway have been thrown into an awful situation too, potentially 3 games to win in All-Ireland. Question mark. 3-4 games to get out of Ulster! Exclamation point. Why is it all weaker counties that seem to be in bother with this? Does it suit them? Dublin, Cork, Limerick, huge populations, not a geek. Either that are lying or the other counties are really unlucky. I think this is very disappointing. This fixture should have been fulfilled if at all possible. Now, so Tomas, obviously we've had a bit of reaction to this, most extreme of which is Leitrim chairman Enda Stenson calling for you to be dropped from the Sunday game. So I guess... Yeah, Rory, the producer of the Sunday game, laughs. But I suppose you obviously feel very strongly about this, Tomas, and you had questions asked. And I guess what people are wondering about is it was the does it suit them question, I think, which has probably got most people's goats.
Yeah. Well, look, Mikey, I suppose I'll come at it from the word go, and I suppose I'll give my explanation to it. And looking back at it, the wording possibly was abrupt, and it might have come across as if I wasn't, I suppose, sensitive to the pain and the hurt that's going around the country, and the fact that this is bigger than sport, and the fact that it has affected so many people around the country. And I didn't mean it maybe to sound like that, and had I more time, I would have thought about it. But in the last couple of weeks, I suppose, in the last few months, there was a decision made, and we could be here all night discussing if it was the right decision or if it was the wrong decision to hold a championship this year. But the decision was made to hold a championship, right? Now, every player and every team, like I suppose every team doesn't have a choice really. You know, you field your championship team. No team came out saying that they weren't going to field a championship team. You had like Mickey Quinn above in Longford, and everybody respected his decision for not wanting to take part in the championship. And I presume there's players maybe from lesser counties that didn't want to be part of panels, and that was fine. And look, it was a scenario, I suppose. It started with Longford, which I thought was wrong. I think when the country is not under fire, but when there's so much pressure and so much pain and so much, I suppose, people looking at GAA and why has GAA been given the green light to have a football championship, and then you're thinking, right, we can do this properly. And I think the figures back up that, yes, the celebrations might have had something to do with figures rising, but the actual sport itself hadn't. And I think it's actually okay, and I don't see. First of all, I wouldn't be a guy who'd look down on weaker counties. Never had. As a player, I'd always showed respect to them. Always. I've never, as a pundit, look down on them or see them as something different, or the fact that they put in less effort. Nothing like that. But since the start, there's always been questions about a 2-tier championship, and the back door was brought in to give teams a second chance. And I think it's a fair thing to do, to question, right? There was 3 incidents. You had Longford, you had Leitrim, and you had Sligo, where there was issues. There was a Fermanagh game where there was issues. There was a Roscommon game where there was issues, right? And the only reason that I actually asked the questions was the fact that Fermanagh, under serious pressure, and Roscommon, under serious pressure, fulfilled their fixtures, okay? Now, some people, and it's been thrown about, that the weaker counties don't have the resources, the weaker counties don't have the numbers, the weaker counties, it's been thrown at me, don't have the same level of interest yet. And it's not me against weaker counties, but you would have to ask questions. You know, if the weaker counties want a voice when it comes to, and deserve a voice, I agree they deserve it, totally like everybody else. In terms of championship, the layout of championship, the reason if they want to be in the two-tier championship and if they want a full All-Ireland rather than a two-tier championship, then I think it is reasonable to question issues like this.
Okay.
Because I do think, and I've heard stories, and people have contacted me in private, and there's been a big issue about privacy and all this. I think it's a legitimate question, Mikey, to question, do these counties that have been involved with situations like this, and Leitrim and Sligo, and they take personal insult from me, but I think it's a legitimate question, because every time I speak to somebody, they ask me the question, do they put in the same level of protocols as other counties? Do they take the same level of care? And I'm sure they do, right? Yeah. And then the question would be asked, I got a phone call off Terry Hyland last night, and I spoke with him for an hour, and we had a really pleasant chat, and we went through everything. And I understand the challenges that some counties would have in terms of numbers and in terms of backup and in terms of financial issues. But there are certain things that you can do. I question straight up how it came about that there was 10 cases.
Okay, can I come in here, because I was talking to someone up in Sligo today, and I got a good lowdown on it. So I'll go at it from the start, is how he described it. So they've 32 players in their squad. That's as much as they can have. That's as much as they can pretty much afford to keep in a senior football squad. 2 injured against Limerick, a cruciate in the shoulder. 2 more injured against Carlow, who not as serious as injuries, but they're out. That brings them down to a 28-person squad. At the start of the week, they had the 7 positives. And they had 4 close contacts, so that brings them down to 21, plus another 4 players out. That brings them down to 17. There were 3 awaiting tests and 5 inconclusive tests waiting to come back. So we now know that it's actually 10 players and 1 backroom team. So they knew, and they had to have a team into Croke Park on Wednesday. They had to name a team for Croke Park and a squad for Wednesday. Their problem, as far as they saw it, was that they've quite a young squad. Quite a lot of them live together in Dublin, Galway, Sligo. So the close contacts was going to be an issue for them. They knew that. They considered like backroom team members togging out, being put down on the panel just to make up what they needed, but they thought that would be kind of making a mockery of it. And a week's postponement would have done them no good, because the close contacts were ruled out for 14 days, and a lot of the people who were tested positive would have been ruled out for so a week's postponement would have done them no good. And this, I was told, they think possibly that it came from, they had 2 dressing rooms in Limerick, and it seems to be a lot of the cases came from one of those dressing rooms. So it seems somebody was asymptomatic or whatever, and that they don't know this for sure, but it's from looking at who had it and who was in this dressing room, they seem to think it was from that. And about bringing in other players, their point was that the county final was played on the weekend of the 24th, 25th of September. So there's any good club footballers in Sligo haven't kicked a football in over a month, and they were thinking, again, they were wondering, would there have been any point in doing that? But they said they did consider it. They did think about either bringing in, like having the physio and the PRO like being named in the squad and lacing up their boots, or bringing in club players. And they just thought, as much as the players were mad keen to play, they just couldn't make it add up. So that was the explanation they got anyway.
Yeah, well, look, and it's not, I've no doubt that the lads in Sligo want to play a championship, and it's not really personal against Sligo, right? But I would question, right, if a team has a situation where there's 10 positives, I question whether they're doing things right. And there's no way in hell, Mikey, that a team are going to come out and say, well, we did this wrong, and we did this, and there was, like, I've heard numerous stories, and it's all hearsay, but I've heard different stories to situations in Sligo, right? And the reason I actually argued it in the first place is, and people say, Tomas, that was in the league. If Fermanagh, and this is another thing, I don't know the full story behind what's happening in Sligo. I also don't know the full story about what's happening behind closed doors in Fermanagh. But if it was a case that Fermanagh were able to travel with the fact that they had 18 close cases and actual COVID cases amongst their players, if Roscommon were able to field a team with 11 players and 2 management teams, then, like, I just get a bit angry, because I do think, right, I'd be the devil's advocate here. if Sligo were playing Leitrim in the championship, right, and people would say, oh, you're down on the weaker counties here again, Tomas, and I do think it's an easier opt-out and it's an easier decision to be made.
I do think, Tomas, part of it is the fact.
Decision taken by the Sligo GA County Board.
I do think a factor was they didn't feel they could do themselves justice in light of the opposition they were playing. And, you know, I think we were always going to get a casualty. Like, I mean, there would be something almost strange in a year, like if there hadn't been, that was like someone tweeted it, when was the last time we had a walkover? We were saying it was Tipperary in 2004, an internal dual fixture was set and they gave a walkover against Fermanagh. But like, I wouldn't be so hard on Sligo. I do think huge credit is due to what Fermanagh did, that they fulfilled the fixture. They were probably going to get relegated anyway. It was nearly that Clare, because Clare could have got promoted. So what they did for the integrity of Division 3, I think was a huge effort. But also, they were building towards a first round game against Down this weekend. Sligo had nowhere else to go this weekend, and because of the time frame they had, ideally it would be, of course, you'd have had it delayed. Like here in Clare, you know, just the local club here, Clondegad, their game against Cratloe was postponed because Cratloe had an outbreak. The championship was held up for 2 or 3 weeks. Cratloe ended up getting to the county final. Like, we're just on such a tight time frame. Unfortunately, they were a casualty. So I think, and you know, you're right, Tomas, there might have been not great protocols, but unfortunately that was going to happen, and I don't think they were deliberately negligent, you know. I think you were going to get a case where you were going to get cases. So it's unfortunate, and of course part of the integrity factor is we are looking at Galway. It's not since 1980 when Kerry went straight through to a provincial final and 3 games to win in All-Ireland. That's the one downside here. And Galway have lost, which was, I totally agree with you with, like Ronan McCarthy made the point about Longford, to give up that game. That you'd have to ask about not just the competition integrity, but Cork lost a game when games are at a premium to get ready for a game. And Galway now, like, who can you get a challenge game against at this time of year, at this notice? So they're at that's a huge downside for them. But like, Galway had tanked them the last 2 times. I think they were on to another hiding to nothing, and I just feel they couldn't do themselves justice. So I wouldn't be overly harsh on them. Yeah.
But I take that point, Kieran, and it's not, I suppose, the whole ire of the tweet wasn't, I suppose, for Sligo alone. I think the Longford thing kicked it off. The Leitrim thing initially kicked it off. And I said, no, lads, it is too easy. The country is coming at us here from all sorts of angles. And here we are, our own gang. And there's a lot of GA people out there that don't think that we should be even playing championship. And I get that. And it's not. Geez, like, the COVID has come to our door. The COVID has come to the house where we've actually had to lock ourselves into the house for a couple of weeks during the whole lockdown. And that's just private stuff, and there's no issue. But it's not even transparency. I think, Kieran, that if Terry Hyland, I spoke to him last night, and I'm chatting to him, and he's explaining to me, and I'm saying, Jesus, Terry, why don't you come out and actually explain all that? And it would be a way easier for us to take. And the Sligo thing, I think they dealt with it a lot better. And they came out, and I would accept, it is very hard for them to feel a team. But then the anger would start boiling up in me again, and I'm saying, why did it happen? Why was there a kid? And you hear stories throughout, and I'm not going to say it now, Kieran, because it's not fair, and I've gotten enough trouble. Jesus, my wife is giving out to me now for actually picking up a phone now, but you'd hear these things and you say, no, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old would tell them that's wrong. And I don't know, is it true or is it not true? But, like, I mean, all we can do is look at other teams. There was big hurrah made out of Kerry, and I've no doubt that other counties are the same in terms of the fact that they travelled all the way to Monaghan, and they all travelled separately, and maybe other counties don't have the resources. But then does it become an issue that the GA seriously have to look at compensating teams that can travel or can't bring players home from college and have to bring them individually or whatever, because it isn't fair. And the easy option is to bundle 3 or 4 fellas into a car, and then if you have a situation where something sparks off, then only one result is going to come out of it.
Yeah.
But I do think, lads, I would still be of the opinion you fulfill the fixture, like, whatever way. And look, as you described, Mikey, I didn't realise the figures to that extent, right? But look, I do think, I won't call it transparency, but we don't know what's going on inside county doors, and this thing that we can't disclose. I think this details can be disclosed to a certain degree about exactly what's happening and how it happened and how can it be improved, because other counties could learn from mistakes that certain counties are making.
Rory, do you think, Tomas mentioned the integrity of the competition, and there's no doubt that Galway now have a game less to play to win a Connacht title or to win an All-Ireland potentially, and there's no argument there, but it's hard. Is it Sligo who, in your opinion, Rory, who are impacting the integrity of the championship, or is it the GAA by, like, I know there's very little slack, but there was some bit of slack in the calendar to maybe have pushed this game back by a week. It mightn't have done Sligo any good, but the offer wasn't even there.
Look, maybe it's because you probably felt the fixture was, even if it was fulfilled, the chances of Sligo winning it would have been fairly slim anyway. Now, is that an excuse?
That's no basis upon which to make that.
It is true, but I think to my mind, I would argue that the integrity of the competition is absolutely fine. Like, people keep saying that these are going to be called the asterisks championships. I think that is definitely the case. There will be an asterisk. And the asterisk will signify that these are the greatest All-Ireland champions ever, given the stumbling blocks and roadblocks and the fact that they've had to play the game in the middle of a global pandemic, and the fact that they were playing the matches last weekend. Tomas was in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in the middle of a monsoon and hurricane conditions, getting togged outside, getting no dressing rooms, not being able to get food. To my mind, whoever ends up winning these All-Irelands, hurling and football, will be the greatest champions that I'll have ever seen, because of the hurdles they're going to have to jump to get to the end of them. And look, it's very, very unfortunate from a Sligo perspective that they're possibly going to be remembered as the team that wasn't able to fulfill a championship fixture. But I think the championship just has to carry on. Unfortunately, we got told all this at the start, that this was potentially something that could happen. Yeah. It's in a way,
everything is a bonus. You know, we should be grateful for nearly every game, considering we were looking at no games. And if Sligo don't get a game, it is unfortunate. But what would have been more unfortunate is that we didn't have something like, the crack that Cavan Monaghan game was there. Saturday. Like, like you can watch your Man Uniteds, and, even then, it was when we saw the National League start back up, you realise, God, I missed that. And then Championship. And albeit I wouldn't want to return to the old days of, like, I was actually on to Tomas's buddy, Derek Canada, last night for a piece I'm doing on that game in 2000 in particular, where Cork might have been one of the best 3 teams in the country. We're one of the best 2 the previous year. Gone after 70 minutes in Killarney. Monaghan gone after 95 minutes up above in Clonus. God, it was great. We had that, and we're going to have now, looking at the weekends and who's not playing. Look at who is playing.
Exactly.
That's nearly it.
Let's get on to that. Let's start with the big one. Dublin Westmeath, lads. No. Tomas.
You're going to get in trouble.
Tomas stood out of that one. He's had enough with the smile.
No, Tomas. Cork v Kerry. From speaking to a few Cork people who should know better, they're talking with a little bit of confidence. You obviously are a man behind the lines there. Do you think Cork, is there actual confidence among Cork football people, and is it in any way founded?
I don't think. You must be talking to different people. I'm talking
to headbangers.
There doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence, and it's look. It's been a one-sided championship for the last number of years, right? And league, I'd be sceptical enough of looking too deeply into league, and I think championship is obviously different. Cork will be disgusted that they didn't have that Longford game, because they walloped Louth, and I suppose if you look at the Louth game, Louth still kicked 16 scores, and there has to be question marks over a Cork defence. They've had a good success at under 20 level, and there's a lot of those lads that you can't rely on them on putting a stamp or winning matches or being the deciding factor in matches for another couple of years. So you're basically looking at something similar to last year. And then you look at the Kerry side and you're looking at what they're trying to do. And it's obvious that they're looking at their defence. It's obvious that they haven't got it perfected yet. It's obvious that White at wing back is a huge plus, the way he's playing. There's a few of them compared to last year, Mikey. And you have to think, players find form over a course of a championship, which is 5 or 6 months long, right? And now this is like a little blitz in comparison. And players like Gavin White, like Tom Sullivan, like David Clifford, who are playing well, I do think that it is a very important, and the fact that Kerry, even though they played against a very weak and Donegal side, will be coming in. And the one thing, you look at the Cork team and you look at, geez, a big physicality, Hanlon, Maguire, Walsh possibly out around the middle. There's a couple of young fellas, Cathal O'Mahony up front, Gore up front. Powter, I saw him play against Derry. I said it before here. He was very good in terms of orchestrating, but Kerry is a different animal. And somebody said it to me last day, and it was a good point. They said, if you lost David Clifford, if you lost Sean Shea, if you lost David Moore, they're big players. But Cork have so many players along the similar lines that they have no outstanding star that if you said, if they took it out, that makes them a little bit more dangerous, I think, because everybody seems to slot in it to a system. I expect them to be very physical around the middle of the field. I expect them to try to run at Kerry, to try to hurt Kerry, because they did score a couple of goals on Kerry last year. But there's no way, no matter what you throw at me, that I can see Cork beating Kerry.
Yeah.
Nothing that you could throw at me or explain to me, unless Kerry go out and absolutely fold, and there's question marks about the Kerry defence. And those question marks, by the way, Mikey, I won't be happy with until there's a big team. And no disrespect to Cork, because Cork could actually come out and make it very awkward for them in the winter football and the conditions and all that. But Páirc Uí Chaoimh, Rory, you were down there last day, is unbelievable. And if they get weather like they have today in Cork, which is nice and calm, and it'll be a perfect pitch for a game of football. So look, I don't know, Mike, I can't see Cork winning it. I think they have made strides. They shouldn't have been down in Division 3. A lot of people say they're down in Division 3, Mikey, because they didn't perform in Division 2. So the argument that they shouldn't be down there, no, they probably shouldn't. But why are they down there? They're
to be fair, like Cork football was in an abject place between years like 2016 to, you could argue, March 2019, right? But since then, and even when they got relegated, they won 2 of the last 3 games. They won up in Armagh. Like I think they're a team who have been making progress, and I just think, right, of all the teams that were affected by the lockdown, I think Cork have been the team most affected by the lockdown, because last year, why they made a run after getting relegated was they had a brilliant program of challenge games and beat. They got a challenge game against Dublin and beat Dublin, and I know it was only challenge games, but for where they were, it was good for them. The point is, they were the one team that got no challenge games. And going back to the point, like the Longford game was a killer for them because games are at a premium. So they've only been playing them on themselves. They have nothing, like, last March is so long ago, and it was only Division 3. So I think, I cannot, see them actually beating Kerry, but what I would be saying is I'd still be very confident about the Cork project and where they're going. And if there was the other team who have lost out, we were saying on what's happened previous, and we've had to have, a blitz championship, like Cork would have learned, not just if there had been a normal, but also a Super 8s, or just to get more games at that level, because Cork are a top 8 team. To me, who just happened to be because of where they were. And so that's why I'm taking this game seriously. It used to be a cliche for some of us when we were writing the previews back in the day. And you'd ultimately, when Cork had that great team with Canty going up against Tomas and the boys, and just at the very end, you'd say Kerry by 3. I feel this will be a Kerry by 3. I think Kerry will, but by God, they'll know they're in a battle, because when that draw was made last year and it was going to be not the final but the semi-final, you were saying even then, potential ambush. But I just think, like, compared how Cork spent, Tomas mentioned the Louth game, and then we've talked about the Longford game, whereas, okay, that was a weak and Donegal team, but they still had players there, and Kerry have been playing to their own standard, and they picked up more silverware. If you look at it, since King came, they've been in every, they're getting to national finals. They've been, they won the National League, and no more than the Limerick Hurlers. There was something in that, and it was the manner they gave it to Donegal, and the win up in Monaghan was huge. And I just think, I think you know, I could see them winning the All-Ireland, and I just feel like Cork would have been just one of those teams I could have seen being getting to an All-Ireland semi-final if there had been before, but it's just the programme of games, it's too soon for them.
That's the thing, Rory, that
it is.
Cork have improved since last year, probably, and they lost by 3 points. But that was June 22nd last year. Kerry are a hell of a lot better team now than they were on the 22nd of June as well. They're a lot further down the road, aren't they?
Absolutely. Like,
yeah, exactly. And Kerry's ambitions will be to win Sam Maguire. Cork's ambitions, I suppose, as Kieran just mentioned, is probably just to get back competitive, we'll say, at the top 8 table, and then take it from there, because it's been a fairly long journey. But a couple of things I think do play in their favour to make it competitive. They're not going to win. But a couple of things that do play in their favour to make them competitive on Sunday. Number one, it's behind closed doors. Even when you were allowed supporters in, sure, that was effectively what Cork were playing in front of. So there'll be nobody better.
But the only thing, Rory, there'll be
no one better at used to playing in front of no one than the Cork footballers, given how disgraceful the support has been for them down through the years. That's one plus.
But if there's one fixture that Cork people come out for, it's against Kerry.
Yeah.
And you have to say, and you mentioned there about the 17s and 20s winning, whereas Kieran Sheehan was making the point, and you were making the point earlier on, like Cork, that Cork public were getting behind that team, like the core of those boys. I just think they also don't know their best 15, which brings us into, because I've got to go in 2 or 3 minutes, is also the thing, even with an established team and setup like Mayo. I don't know. Like Roscommon, I'll tell you, whatever you say, and as Tomas made the point, they had to be resourceful to fulfill their first game back. But like they know themselves, and I think while Mayo probably have never had a stronger or more competitive panel since 2011, have they ever had a more unsettled or unproven starting 15?
Yeah,
and
like I agree with that.
This game is scary. Like
wide open. Just one final point before you go, Kieran, because I think it's an important one, and I think it might be interesting for you in relation to the Munster game. Like, we've Johnny Bradley there, who does stats work for us. He's very good, actually. Really, really detailed stuff. And I asked him for the report on last year's Cork Kerry game, so I had a look at it, and there were 2 that jumped out at me immediately, right? And it was shooting efficiency and fouls conceded. And Cork's shooting efficiency was 48% versus Kerry's 79%. So that'll give you an indication.
Well, it was goals. It was goals.
Yeah, Cork simply won't. They won't score. They won't score enough. And fouls conceded was 26 versus 11. So the indiscipline at the back. Now, there's no way you're going to be able to close that much of a gap on Sunday. So you can't see anything but a Kerry win. But the first match, I think the first game, I'm going to make the prediction here, Mikey. Hold the front page. We're going to get our first penalty shootout live on national television in the championship match. First penalty shootout. I can see it going the whole way, because I think there's very little between Mayo and Roscommon.
We nearly got one last week, didn't we?
I thought you were talking about the Kerry game.
Kieran, if you want to make an elegant...
Okay, guys.
Good chatting to you, Kieran. And we'll see you again in the hurling in the second half by the magic of modern.
Okay, yeah, I'll be back for that.
How we've moved on, and we won't try and cover every game because there's too many of them, which is a nice thing to be able to say. So we'll finish up with Mayo and Roscommon. A lot of whether Mayo were trying things out and gambling with their Division 1 status last week, or what they were doing the week before last, but they played very strangely. They played one-on-one into a wind. They played man-on-man defense into the wind. They gifted Tyrone a fair few scores. To me, like James Horan, he's around too long to be kind of making silly mistakes. So, is there any kind of sense in thinking that he was looking ahead there and he was trialing combinations or trialing systems or something, or did they really just have a bit of a no-brainer of a day?
Yeah, I think we're still at the stage, Mikey, and the way the teams take shape once championship starts and if teams get on a run. And I suppose that's a danger for certain teams, that if they're being questioned on how they've lined up for the last 2 games. Let's say, for example, if Mayo lose at the weekend, then James Horan will have to ask questions on what he was doing, playing X amount of players and trying out new players, and why wouldn't he stick with certain players? Like, I was surprised the last day with the lineup. He's chopped and changed. I think James Horan is a fantastic manager. I think his first his first stint, yeah, they didn't cross the line, okay? And I don't think you're talking about a special team in Dublin. But even to come back now after the league, right? And they were under pressure and they lost against Tyrone, but there was so many positives to come from it. And I think the biggest positive since they've come back in the last 2 games, and we don't have a big window, is that they're scoring a lot from play. And they're in terms of the percentages of misses and wides, it's always thrown at them. It's always been. The second thing, you look at Kerry and you're talking about Gavin White and you're talking about Diarmuid O'Connor at midfield and you're talking about the actual changes that they've made. Aidan O'Shea has been, I saw Killian O'Connor last time I was watching it and he took off and I was saying, who's that? I just saw the back of him. I haven't seen Killian O'Connor as trim. And well, I won't say as fit because he's constantly been fit, but I haven't seen him burn fellas and stick a goal like that in a while. Aidan O'Shea inside, I think, is a huge thing. I think Tommy Conroy, my point of having players in kind of, I suppose, buzzing at the moment. He's confident at the moment. I still think they have a possibility. They tried McLaughlin at centre back. I still think there's a couple of the older lads. Are they going to come back? How is he going to pick the team? And if he loses again, I think that'll be questioned. But Oisin Mullen is a positive. Conor Loftus out the midfield is a positive. Mark Moran is a positive. But again, like Kieran just said, we don't know what kind of a team he's going to actually name. We don't know what he's going to lay out with. We know what kind of style of football he's going to play. I would like, if you're going to play Aidan O'Shea, and it was positive last year, Leitrim were sticking away with them, and then Leitrim lost a player, and you're saying, cripes, will they bring Aidan O'Shea out? And he does come out the odd time. But this year, I think it is different. I think it is a focal point inside there. I think he takes the pressure off the likes of Tommy Conroy, Killian O'Connor, and I think he is some operator. You have to give it to him. And I have been critical of him in the past, but he doesn't shirk anything. He's as honest as the day is long. And you'd have to admire him year in, year out, National League, Championship, still puts the hand up. Durkin, I think it's when you go through the team, Mikey, you're looking at it. And the thing you fear about Roscommon is their unpredictability. You see them against Armagh, you watch them in that first half and you're saying, God almighty, what are they at? And they have this belief inside themselves that it could spark off at any second. And Cunningham, he's an unbelievable amount of talent. And I know they've been yo-yoing and they're maybe outside the top 4 or 5. But I'll tell you what, I would be thinking that Roscommon have a serious chance. I'd actually be tipping with Roscommon going into this game because they went with their COVID lads missing, the 9 missing, and you see Dory Smith landing out of the blue, getting man of the match, and you see the Murtaghs togging out again, and you're saying, Christ, Carl Craig togged out again, and you say, whoa, they have a solid panel, and they've paid.
There's a craziness. There's a craziness in Roscommon football that if you catch them if you catch them on a bad day for you and a good day for them, Tomas, you're in trouble.
You see, we were always throwing it at them, Rory. And I remember the last time, I might be wrong in this, but I think the last time they played Kerry in Croke Park, Kerry took 4 goals past them before. And then no matter what you were tagging on points, unless they got goals back themselves, they were in trouble. And they did get 2 in that game as well, I think. But this year, all throughout the National League, they haven't conceded 1 goal. So like Kerry, they've really, really focused on their defence. They focus on discipline. They focus on everything. And you're saying, Jesus, Cunningham is a queer hawk. How does he get them? And apparently, you talk about, you'd wonder, and I have a genuine interest in managers and their approach to things and their approach to players. And I've heard it numerous times. They have unbelievable time frame. They have unbelievable buy-in there. They have unbelievable belief above there. And it wouldn't surprise me if Roscommon, they're kind of champions. Why wouldn't they be expecting to make it to an All-Ireland semi-final this year above all years?
Yeah. And they're a team in form, as you said. They won their promotion back to Division 1 while, losing a significant number of their squad to COVID. Rory, they're you talk about a team having a good lockdown or whatever. They had a terrible one, but the results still, still spoke for themselves. So back to full strength now. They'll have incredible belief out of that.
Yeah, and they have been, as Tomas mentioned there, they have been a bit of a yo-yo team in terms of their league form. But people tend to forget last year they won the Connacht Championship. They beat Galway and Mayo, I think both away from home. By winning that, they beat Mayo, I think, in Castlebar, and then went and beat Galway in Salt Hill. I mean, this is not some sort of fly-by-night team. The Roscommon are a serious team, And I think this is a massive, massive challenge for Mayo. And I think it's a very, very hard one to call. I'd probably just about fall down on the side of Mayo because I think they probably have a little more depth. And if the game gets nitty gritty, and as I would expect, possibly extra time where you will have to start dipping into numbers 19, 20, 21. I think Mayo might have a bit of an edge in that regard, but it's going to be very, very tight. I wouldn't be surprised one way or the other.
And for us, Rory and Mikey, it's like, this is the beauty, this is the hard side of it for players and management. They don't have that time to get on a bit of a run, like. But for us as spectators, like, Mayo come out, they blow Galway out of the water. Everybody's talking to them about, oh geez, Mayo might have a cut at championship this year. The following week, Tyrone put them to sword. It's very hard to predict and get a run. You'll only be able to say certain teams, look at them kind of critically, how they've improved from the start of the championship. The only two teams you're going to say are the semi-finalists and the finalists, because you'll only see them 3 or 4 times. Like, it's different to any other championship. And as a fan, Christ, like, Mayo or Roscommon would be a cracker. I can't wait.
Can't wait.
On that note, we won't look. There's other games. Obviously, there's the other Munster semi-final, Limerick and Tip. There's a Ulster quarter-final with Cavan and Antrim, and then there's the 4 Leinster Championship quarter-finals, and we might look at the Leinster Championship when it gets to semi-finals or the finals.
Next
but
week,
that'll be time enough for that. Interesting games, 3 of them. We will leave it at that. Thank you to Tomas, and we'll be back in a moment with Brendan Cummins and the amazing reappearing Kieran Shannon.
He hits it! It's over the bar! Oh! Holy Moses!
Welcome back. We have been joined by Brendan Cummins to look ahead to the 2 senior hurling matches this weekend. We have 2 round 1 qualifiers. Of course, we do have a backdoor in hurling this year. And walking through that backdoor first, we have Clare v Laois in Nolan Park at 1:15 p.m. on Saturday, followed by Dublin v Cork in Thurles at 3:45. We might start with the game that maybe, to me anyway, seems slightly more intriguing, Brendan, which would be Dublin v Cork for a number of reasons. Cork didn't cover themselves in glory against Waterford, but they only went down by 4 points in the end. But Dublin are kind of fascinating. They were 3-13 to 7 points down at half-time against Kilkenny. They restricted Kilkenny to 7 points in the second half, which teams don't really do, losing out 320 to 222 in the end. There's certainly, they're not a lost cause, Dublin, by any means. I'm going on that fight, that 35-40 minutes.
No, and I think if we looked at this pairing back in January or February and you said this was going to happen during the summer, you'd probably say that Cork would be happy enough to get a game under their belt against Dublin and march on. But certainly the way Dublin have come back has been seriously impressive. I think Matty will know that he really has something, because you sit in front of your group at half time and you're 15 points down, and then you say to them, come on lads, we'll get it back point by point, and then suddenly you're 16 points down. Then you find out a lot about whether the lads are with you or not. And I think that's been the key for Dublin and Matty Kenny and his backroom team, is that the players are obviously very much invested in what he's trying to do. And of course, any of the likes of Donal Burke and Crummy and these lads. So I think Cork will be a little bit fearful of Dublin because of their physicality as well. In that Crummy will be up there and he'll be crashing into lads. The way Cork used the ball the last day was a big problem for them. Around their own half-back line especially. So if they do try to work it out, the fear for Cork is turnovers, and that's what Dublin will be looking for. And I think if Cork are to jump the fence, they'll have to believe in what they want to try to do, which is work the ball. And if it goes wrong once or twice, well, then you just keep working the ball. Because if they go back to what they did against Watford, hitting the ball long, they're going to make the Dublin centre-back, whoever sits in that role, an absolute hero. And it'll just fizzle out for them. But it is a really, really tight one now, I think, the weekend.
Yeah. Kieran, we were discussing it last week, Cork, and, this idea that they won't be up for winter hurling or this and that. The one thing you can say about them is defensively, they haven't exactly been pulling up trees in the last few years. And Dublin do seem like a team with the likes of Chris Crummy, with the likes of Eamon Dillon coming off the bench. Like, they're a physical team. There's it's not fair to say there's no subtlety about Dublin, but they do. Physicality is one of their calling cards. So if there is any question marks about Cork in that regard, Dublin are a good team to ask those questions.
Yeah, look, with Cork, there's a question about the physicality and ball winning, particularly area ball winning ability of the forwards, and the backs as well. That half-back line, you could argue, has been a crisis issue for Cork ever since the great triumvirate of O'Halpy and Gardner and Curran broke up in the in the early noughties. With Cork, it's hard to know with them, right? Because they have given a reaction the odd time. Like if you remember at the start of last year's Munster Championship, they got beaten on their own home patch by Tip. And it was, for Cork's first outing at the time as Munster champions, and then the next day out they were playing Limerick, the All-Ireland champions, and it was the first time Cork won a battle, but it's just not done on a consistent enough basis. Like even coming down to Ennis here last year, albeit it depended on results whether they were assured basically through to the All-Ireland series, but it was still the way it was a lame effort. And obviously the Kilkenny game, like the one thing Cork will have to do, whatever the size, it's the old one about the size of the dog, or it's not the size of the dog, but the size of the fight in the dog. Cork have to bring that with whatever lineup they have. But there is just a question mark about the balance, particularly off the forward line as well. Like as Brendan said, the ball that was being played into them was wrong, but like as much as let's say a Limerick are very measured in how they enter the ball and they can get the ball into whether it's a Graham Mulcahy or an Aaron Gillan, those guys can win it even if it's not perfect. And outside of the whole, like there'll have to be changes with that Cork team on both just a matchup point of view and also just they have to, because it's the last game it's potentially the last game of the year. There has to be something that, well, somebody was blooded. There has to be a tweak. Last year, like was it Mark Ellis came? He was wearing jeans the first day of the Tip game. Came back in at number 6. I don't think you'll have something as radical as that, but you will. There'll have to be shake-up in particularly the forward line. But it is a style of play too, as Brendan said. But the biggest thing you have to get and what they brought against Limerick that time, Aidan Walsh came back in that day, and if Aidan Walsh is at all fit, they'll need someone like that just to add a bit of balance and fight to that forward line, because otherwise they're going to be blown out of it by a physical Dublin team that are up for it, as Brendan said.
Yeah, there was something I couldn't understand also with Cork. They have picked Patrick Horgan as a corner forward. And when you've a Ty Burkett, I figure, I know if I'm playing against Cork, I want somebody sitting back, stop the ball going into Patrick Horgan, and prevention is better than cure. Why not put Patrick Horgan centre forward? Mm-hmm. He is capable of doing the Keane Lynch job, the Joe Canning job. He's not afraid of work. He's brave. He'll hit it over the bar from 100 yards. And why not ask the Dublin centre back the weekend, what are you going to do now? Are you going to stay standing inside there and look at the ball flying over your head from 100 yards? Are you going to get a midfielder to pick him up? Just give the opposition something different. And I thought the last day against Waterford, if I had any complaint to what the managing team in Cork were doing, is they should have brought Patrick Horgan out to play 10 yards up the pitch and tie the Burka and make him mark somebody. And that then really brings space for the inside forwards. If you've Luke Meade inside, Kingston inside. And I agree a bit, Kieran, about the fact you say they'll win it anyway. But if you're on the inside forward line and you're not sure when the ball is going to come in, is it going to come in from 100 yards, from 40 yards? You don't know when to make the run. Whereas Limerick know that there's no point in making a run until the ball gets to the middle of the field or around the opposition 65. Then I'm going to go. But if you're playing with Cork the last day, like, there is no way, if you're on the inside, what the half-back line are going to do, what the midfielders are going to do. So you're kind of a bit paralysed. A little bit like we found with Shamie Callan the last day with Tipperary. No puck, running into blind alleyways, no ball coming in. So that's the one thing that stumps me with Cork, that Horgan doesn't come out the field when they're under pressure, just to give the opposition something else to worry about.
How about that, Rory invested in this as well, obviously, as a Cork man. The idea that almost should Cork kind of go out with a Brazil attitude, try and get Patrick Horgan to score, get as many as he can, bring in the likes of Luke Meade with Harnedy and Alan Cadigan, and try and outscore the team, and maybe hope your defence improves, but just try and outscore the opposition, because that has to be their best hope.
It's a super point by Brendan. And even if it isn't to centre forward, even on the wing, like the one thing Hoggy is well able to do, he is actually well able to win the ball over his own head. And he's pretty good in the air. And if he's being boxed off inside, somewhere along the 40 would be a better option than having him have no influence at all. But the thing for me with Cork is it's a kind of to go, like Kieran mentioned the game against Limerick last year. I would actually bring you back 12 months before that again for a real sliding doors moment for Cork hurling. They were in their second semi-final in a row, and they were 6 or possibly 7 points up against Limerick with about 7 or 8 minutes to go and blew it, right? Now, we know what Limerick have gone on to afterwards by winning 2 National Leagues, a Munster Championship and an All-Ireland, and Cork have won nothing since then. Now, it's the same players for both panels, pretty much. Exactly the same. It's the same players for Limerick, same players for Cork. But what I've seen with Limerick is a physical development and a fitness development that I do not see with Cork. I think I'm not privy to information on the inside, but just looking at them last Sunday, the first question I asked in my head was, are they fit enough? And it's a terrible indictment now. I know that Kieran Kingston is a great guy, and he might, what are you saying? But I think there's a personal responsibility on a lot of players, given that they were all in lockdown for 8 months. I mean, look at the condition Limerick came back in. Look at the condition that Galway are in. I think you're at nothing in inter-county hurling unless you can front up in the physical stakes first and foremost these days. By and large, most of the players that play inter-county hurling, they'll all be much of a muchness when it comes to basic skills and just, being able to execute all the sort of rudimentary stuff that you would associate with the game of hurling. But where the big differences start to come into play, because that middle 8 now has become such a war zone, is your physical conditioning and your ability to compete in there. And Cork are being bullied every time. And I think it's plain as day for anybody watching it. They'll have all the skills to pay the bills, but can they bring the fight when it really matters? And unfortunately, even if they get over Dublin this weekend, which I think they might just have enough, it's only a stay of execution for me.
But it would still be, it's a huge game in its own right, like in that, to go, let's say for either team, to win no game in the championship, like there's at least something to build on if Cork do get a win. I know now, let's say when they beat Dublin in the qualifier in Kingston's first year, the first time around, it fell flat by the nature of the defeat against Wexford, who weren't going great themselves. It was Liam Dunn's last campaign. But let's say the difference between, it's more than about a stay of execution, albeit I agree with you. I don't see Cork getting to the All-Ireland semi-final. Yeah. But it would just be a huge thing for some kind of something to build on. Like you'd have to say, it's like all these factors that we're talking about where Cork have been off for the last 2 years, 2 months or so. That's true. But the one thing I would say is, this isn't an excuse, but they were one of the last teams getting back as a group together because of the nature of the Pro Lawn County Championship. They would feel like another game would bring them on so much. And I just think for 2021, the difference between Cork, let's say, beating Dublin, putting it up to whoever they meet in the next round, as opposed to losing by 4 or 5 again, I would say, as much as it's been an odd season where they haven't had a run at it, it's huge for the Kingston Project Mark II to get a win this weekend, because otherwise I think it would be very flat going into 2021. They have to show, and players are playing for their careers here, because because Kingston will be back to, he won't be going again after just one season in his second way back. But if he does come back, I would imagine there'd have to be a ruthlessness. And so players, you take even, a Conor Lahan, who, I would have been a fan of through the years, but, you can talk about the balance of the forward line. He gets the jersey and, they have to see something when he gets on the field. It could be a 20-minute role or whatever it is, but players like that, because it just can't keep going on. Cork tamely exiting like they have been. There has to be something different. So it's a massive game because careers are on the line.
There's passion.
I think probably a positive for Cork is that if half back line, Downey and Joyce and all, and obviously Coleman is able to use it, if they can use the ball better, then they'll become 50% a better team than they were the last day against Waterford. They hoovered up a lot of possession in the half back line, and off the back foot then they just spun it up into the air, and that was that. But like if you watch it on the game, as the ball flies through the air, you can see loads of red shirts in between it with no Waterford marking them, all the way down to where all the Waterfords were standing waiting for this to happen. So I think if Kingston and the Rock, they're very, very shrewd operators. They'll show the videos to players, say, lads, we had loads of possession. Like the centre back and the half back then has much possession as Tyga Burka has. The only difference is that Tyga Burka has a better understanding that when he gets the ball, he can't hit it long because there's bodies around him. He notices loads of white shirts and he goes, wait now, we've loads of bodies here. I can't hit it up the pitch. I'll run it through the lines. Whereas Cork saw loads of red bodies around him and thought, oh, jizz, I'll get it in quick. Whereas, get it in first time is what they told me. And it's just not working. So that little tweak alone will make them way, way better. Right?
Brendan, where's that coming from though? Is that like, obviously they had a game plan, they were sent out to play in a certain way, or would you expect inter-county hurlers to be able to scan the field, see what way Waterford are lining out and say, right, we may have been told to play the ball first time, but that's not going to work here, so let's adapt?
Yeah, I think when Tyga Burka caught the 6th or 7th ball in a row, which is fairly time to decide, you know what, I don't fancy him getting an all-star virtually at the end of the year. I might decide to do a little different. And then we have water breaks as well in the game. So every 15 minutes there's a break. So somebody somewhere has to say, hang on a minute, lads, have the guts to play the ball through the lines like we're able to do. And when Downey gets the ball, or Chris or Joyce, Mark Coleman's very good at it now. He's not really in that bucket, play the ball shorter and then go again. But I mean, you do have to, if you're winning All Irelands, the manager can only do so much. You go in between the white lines, it's up to you to make the decisions. Any major tactical ones like changing positions and all the players, the manager does. But when you're in the game, you can't stop and say, where should I hit this now? Or, oh my God, I hit it down to somebody. Where is everybody? That doesn't work. That's Junior B stuff, in a lot of ways,
Yeah. So
I think Kieran makes a good point as well, though, Mikey, in that there are lads probably playing for careers at this stage, because the one thing that you would have to say, in fairness to Kieran as well, Kieran Kingston, the manager, he's not afraid to throw young lads in. It was in his first year where he basically took out the entire left-hand side of the team and supplanted in the Mark Coleman, Luke Meade, his own son, for instance, and so he's not afraid to gamble with young lads. And I would say certainly for a couple of the more senior players there that have been knocking around now a long, long time, I would say are very much in last chance saloon, because there are some good young players coming. Are they going to be good enough to challenge for positions? We don't really know just yet. The biggest worry again, I suppose, is it's just, I'd be interested, maybe this is a podcast for another day, but Cork there's been tame defeats. Kieran mentioned the tamed exit and tame defeat. There's been a lot too many of them in an under-21 final 2 years ago, where they were the reddest of hottest of favourites, lost to Tipperary. Liam Cahill was over them. Lost again last year to Tipperary in another All-Ireland under-20 final. Have lost a couple of minor finals, and the senior team isn't going really well. Now, we were told once upon a time that there was plenty of players coming through. We've yet to see that. Maybe that will manifest itself over the next couple of years, and I think Kieran is certainly the fella that will blood those guys if they're there. But I would 100% endorse what Kieran said, that I think there's a few of them now that are very much on their last warning here, because you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results.
Right. We will move on to the other game, because there's I have a feeling there's
one final point.
One thing. Who do you think will win, Brendan? Who do you think will win?
Having all said and done, I think Cork will have too much this time round. I just think if it turns into a free-taking competition, which sometimes it can happen in games like this when everybody's thundering at each other, Dublin will be told hit Cork everywhere they move, which is fine, to try to see can they break them. But I do think Cork will jump the fence.
Okay. And Cork wins from you two lads, yeah?
Well, I think they should just about have enough up front to rack up a big enough score that'll probably make it too difficult for Dublin to chase down. But I wouldn't be 100% certain by any stretch of the imagination. I think Dublin will have taken a hell of a lot more from their defeat to Kilkenny than Cork would have from theirs to Waterford. So I think it's 50-50, but I'd give Cork a hesitant nod.
Okay. Kieran?
I just think Cork are one of those teams that, they're too good not to win one game in the year, to go 0-2. That would be my thinking. I'm not convinced about them, as I said, getting over the next day, tipping Wexford, waiting. But I think that there has to be something more about them. And but look, it's going to be extremely tight. You'd have to say, like, I agree with Brendan with his point. Like, the likes of Ger Cunningham, Chris O'Connor's helping out in the training. Those guys, they will have to learn and they will make adjustments. And I go back to it. It was the great thing about the hurling is that there is a backdoor. Like that. Particularly with no National League leading, like the footballers had, like that. Just the rust factor. Like you're talking about the decision making. It just is guys were playing and there was a lot of good feeling about the Cork Championship this year, but being as a unit playing at that pace, they were just off it, and I think that was a factor too. So I think the fact they've got a game now under their belts and there has to be a reaction, I just think Cork will just shade it. But like Dublin will go, we know Dublin will bring the fight, because if ever there was a day to give up, it was last Saturday.
Well, I backed Laois to beat Dublin, so I owe Dublin one, so I'm going to back them to win. That's very scientific. We're running out of time, so quickly to the other qualifier, Clare v Laois. There's just one that I just totted this up here before we started, Brendan. Against Dublin, Laois man had 9 scorers, which is not bad. Against Limerick, Clare had 5. Not a single score off the bench, and as we all know, Tony Kelly scored 17 points, 9 from play. Laois may be the minnows in this championship, whether they're the team that were promoted from Joe McDonagh, so it's not unfair to say they're the lowest ranked team in it, Brendan, but even Laois deserve to be beaten by more than a one-man team and will have a shot if it's Clare playing a similar fashion, you'd have to think.
Well, and it's hard on Eddie because if you think about it, last year they won the Joe McDonagh, they got to Croke Park. Then they beat Dublin on this wave of emotion. I think if you're going to get the best out of a team and do things that they thought they could never do, you do need to have that momentum. And unfortunately for Laois this year, they've had a standing start. I don't think they got to complete the championship up there either, the club championship. So it was very, very difficult position for Eddie. Now, the last day, I think you'll see the best of Laois when Paddy Purcell plays further up the pitch. I mean, Pickey did okay. Mark Kavanagh came on as a sub the last day, who would be one of their stars in last year's championship. So I think this time round, Laois will play more, I think, of an attacking style game that hopefully take the fight to Clare, because they'll know Clare are just as brittle as they are. And this time of the year, it is real knockout now. And if Laois can find something like what they had last year against Tipperary, that fight where just before the throw in, there was Tipla's nearly lying on the ground. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of physicality that Laois need to bring, angry and raw. And if they can find that, well, then they have a bit of a chance of sticking in there and hoping that when it gets to squeaky bum time there to finish, that Clare might panic a small bit. But it's very hard to see beyond Clare when all is said and done, having a game under their belt the last day now against Limerick, who I suppose haven't seen what they've done since. It's no shame in the world to only have 4 scores.
Yeah, that's true enough. Kieran, one reason to root for Clare is this is their backdoor game. If we lose Tony Kelly this early in our very late championship, it would be a real shame, because I think we'd all agree he probably has his off days, or maybe those years when he's not quite at this level. But I think going from what we've heard about the club championship in Clare and what we saw the last day, at his best, he's otherworldly, really, isn't he?
His consistency, I would say, if it was like the National League seems such a long time ago, almost irrelevant to where we are now. But if you take it as a year, if you were doing an MVP like they do in the States, where they have a regular season and everything, and you factored in the club, he's the hurler of the year. He's in pole position. Like, I remember when Ballier were going for the Munster club 4 years ago, I compared him to the nearest thing to Lahey, like in terms of someone who's not playing in the inside line. He was playing a lot of hurling in midfield for Ballier, or going to the half-hour line like Lahey used to do with Mullen O'Hone and Tip, like just taking over a game. Like, you don't blink in Clare when you hear 1-8 that he got 1-8. that could be just from play. Like it's standard. Like you might get an inside forward doing that for someone. And as like Daly made the point, like here in Ballyea, Niall Deasy would take most of the frees. Albeit Tony's taking some big ones as well. And so he is the package. So that is one of the joys of the back door. And Clare would expect so that we'll be seeing a game 3 for him. You'd expect him to get over Laois. The only thing is I know it was the handier draw, but let's say Clare traditionally, like when Daly got his chastening in 2004, let's say his first championship game, got hammered by Waterford, Laois was the game to get them back on the road, and they brought Kilkenny to a replay. It happened in 2013 as well. When they made the run, they had Laois. Like Laois are a different proposition now, and you know it is a huge game for Laois, because just if you look at it, like for Eddie, like you know it's year 2, and it's again, they want to have something to show for this year, and it has been very stop-start, as Brendan said. And I think Laois will bring everything to this game. So it is like, you know, I expect it to be a 4 or 5 point game. I do expect Clare just to get over. Like the one thing, if I was a Clare player, and as much as Kelly is exceptional, you know, I'd be railing a bit this notion of being a one-man team. I know that's how it looked the last day. And look, they're down so many players. Just the future is the past now. Like the Conor McGraths are gone, the Podges is gone. You know, Duggan and Conlon being between injury and sabbatical, not being there. That's where, you know, I'd expect, you know, Aaron Cunningham was someone who I always felt, and Shanahan will have to, you'd expect to get more game time, if not the start. Clare, as Brendan said, don't look as bad as they did. You know, a double-figure defeat to Limerick doesn't look as bad as it maybe did at the time. But Clare have to. I thought just Clare's like the Shane O'Donnell, how they use Shane O'Donnell. You know, if you're going to use him in that role, like Brendan again is talking about inside line. Brendan, what struck you watching how they used O'Donnell, or how the way that they should, because it just seemed like inappropriate ball was going in there and it wasn't sticking, and you know, it was just left for Kelly to pick off what he was getting.
Yeah, I don't think Shane O'Donnell is a right half forward either, and he ended up out there for a lot of the second half against the wind, and it wasn't the ideal at all. I think you have to play the ball in from 40, 50 yards out for Shane O'Donnell. It needs to come in fast. It can't come from 60, 70 yards into him, because you get bust up all over the place. So you need to work the ball again, probably between the opposition 65 and 45, and then deliver it into Shane O'Donnell. And that's when he's at his very best. You know, it comes in that way. And that's what's happened before between Galvin and Kelly. If you think about it, that axis in the middle of the field, Galvin would get the ball, he'd hand pass to Tony Kelly on a loop, and Kelly striking the ball in from 55 yards or so into Shane O'Donnell, and Shane O'Donnell looks like an absolute flying machine. But if the ball is hit from around the middle of the field by Fitzgerald or any of them into the corner, this time of the year, he's going to get killed. Because if you think about the natural thing for Shane O'Donnell in the summer is he's facing the stand about 35, 40 yards out to the side, and he gets it and he turns in a dry day. But you can imagine now, like, Thurles isn't going to be like a bog by any manner of means, but it's certainly not going to be like it was in June. So when he gets the ball facing the stand, all the cornerback's going to do is stand him up. And when he stands him up, then he's going to keep pushing, and Shane is caught. And then the wing back comes back and he's smothered, and the whole place goes, oh no, this Shane O'Donnell's not playing well. So it's where you deliver the ball from is the key. And I think that was the problem the last day a lot with Clare, that they didn't work it in. They didn't work it in far enough, and that was it. But I would touch again on Shanahan and Cunningham. They're two, I think, that have to play the next day. They're big boys. They have a bit of pace about them as well. So if you're playing two inside, which I would presume they will, because I think Laois will go with a sweeper. So you have two in there. You need dynamic pace. And if one of them is Shane O'Donnell in there and the other one is Shannon or Cunningham, whichever one the case may be, that's the way it has to go. But they do need corrective surgery on the start of the team. And for me, it might be harsh on Laois. If Limerick or if Clare are serious about this thing, they have to win this by 7 or 8 points or more. If it's any less than that, it just good enough and won't give them enough encouragement when they go into play the next round, the second round of the round robin, the qualifiers. It won't be enough, to be honest.
Just one final point, Mikey, and I think Kieran made mention of it earlier. I do actually think, and it's an important one, everybody's got a game under their belt now. I think there was a bit of whinging and moaning there, I suppose, after the weekend. A lot of the hurling kind of, thus far had been very kind of one-sided, 8, 9, 10-point beatings one way or the other. And the games had lacked a competitiveness that we maybe had grown accustomed to. I think you're probably going to see that start to level off a small bit more now with the fact that everybody's got a game. There's no more second chances really, bar, I suppose, the provincial finalists, which to me is a qualification for the quarter-final more so than a backdoor. And I think the standards will certainly be up now over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to see some serious hurling. Like, the real championship now starts from here on in, and I think the fact that they've all got a game under their belt is going to help enormously.
Okay. And just to remind people that the winners of those matches, Dublin v Cork and Clare v Laois, they can play each other, or they can be drawn against Wexford or Tip, and Wexford and Tip can be drawn against each other. It's an open draw for of the qualifiers. Right, lads, that's all we have time for this week. As with last week, there's an abundance of games. There's 5 on Saturday and there's 6 on Sunday between BBC Northern Ireland, RTÉ2, RTÉ News, BBC Northern Ireland, mentioned them already, Sky, and GAA Go. You can watch them all. You can listen to updates on Saturday and Sunday sport on RTÉ Radio 1, and we'll have live blogs of all those games on the RTÉ website and the RTÉ News app. So you're well covered. And so we'll just leave it at that and say thank you very much to Rory and to Kieran and to Brendan and to Tomas earlier. And we'll catch you next week.
How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits